He scratched his back with my grill tongs, in my robe, while sipping coffee from my chipped Ranger's mug. Then she walked in, kissed him, and laughed like I never existed. My wife, in our kitchen, with that man, but it got worse. While I watched from across the street, she pulled a letter from the mailbox and tucked it into her waistband, smiling. That smile wasn't for me. It was never coming back. I'd been erased. My name, my house, my bank account, gone. But she didn't know one thing. I was already in the driveway, and I wasn't going anywhere. But before we begin, let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. My name is Jack Meriden, and I'm 33 years old. After 15 years in the Army as a mechanic, I've built my life around fixing things, vehicles, homes, and broken promises. My wife Tessa, who I married straight out of high school, used to call me her steady rock, though lately those words have felt more like stones in my gut. Our small Kansas home isn't much, but I've maintained every inch of it between deployments, just like I've maintained the paid-off Ford in our driveway. Tessa's been spending more time on her phone these days, posting selfies with new friends I've never met, while our own photos gather dust on the mantle. I didn't tell her I was coming home early, just quietly arranged it with my CO, Lieutenant Barnes, when those late-night texts started feeling wrong. But let me start from the beginning. I sat there in the airport parking lot, staring at those 5 words until they burned into my retinas. Don't come home this time. My duffel bag suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds in the passenger seat. You know that moment when your whole world shifts, but your body hasn't caught up yet? That's where I was, suspended between what I thought I knew and what I was about to learn. The drive home was a blur. 15 years of military discipline kept my hands steady on the wheel, but my mind was racing through every possibility. Maybe she was planning a surprise. Maybe she'd lost her mind. Maybe. But deep down, I already knew. You don't spend years reading terrain without learning to spot ambush signs. I pulled up across the street from our house, my house, and killed the engine. The November morning was crisp, leaves scattered across our front lawn like nature's camouflage. The garage door was closed, but Tessa's car was in the driveway. So was my truck. The truck I'd paid off before deployment, the one she'd promised to keep safe for me. Something moved in the kitchen window. A figure, broad-shouldered, wearing what looked like my old flannel robe, the one Tessa had given me 3 Christmases ago. The stranger, because that's what he was in my home, reached up to the cabinet where I keep my favorite coffee mug. The Ranger's one. The one with the chip on the handle that I'd never bothered to replace because some things are worth keeping, even when they're broken. My hands tightened on the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. You ever watch a movie where the sound cuts out and everything moves in slow motion? That's how it felt when Tessa walked into frame. She was wearing her morning yoga pants, hair pulled back like always. She looked happy, relaxed, like nothing in the world was wrong. The man turned. I could see his profile now. Scruffy beard, baseball cap on backwards like some overgrown teenager. He said something that made her laugh. Then she reached up, pulled him down by the collar of my robe, and kissed him. Right there in my kitchen, drinking from my mug, living my life. My first instinct was to march across that street and kick in my own front door. 15 years ago, that's exactly what I would have done. But the Army teaches you something valuable. Intelligence before action. Don't react. Record, I whispered to myself, the words feeling like gravel in my throat. So I sat there, watching. The man moved through my house like he owned it, using my grill tongs to scratch his back through my robe. Every casual gesture was another needle under my skin. But I kept watching, kept recording every detail in my mind like I was back on reconnaissance. Tessa came outside to get the mail, never once glancing toward my rental car. She had that bounce in her step, the one she used to have when we first got married, the one I hadn't seen in years. She was humming, actually humming, as she sorted through the envelopes. One caught her attention, made her smile wider. She tucked it into her yoga pants before heading back inside. That's when it hit me. Really hit me. This wasn't a one-time thing. This wasn't a mistake or a moment of weakness. This was a life she'd built while I was away. A life she'd carefully constructed around my absence, using my things, my house, probably my money. And that letter she'd hidden? My gut said it wasn't a birthday card. I thought about all those late-night social media posts, all those new friends I'd never met, the way she'd stopped asking when I was coming home, the subtle changes in her voice during our calls. Every piece clicked into place, like a weapon being assembled. You'd think 15 years of military service would prepare you for anything, but watching your wife kiss another man through your own kitchen window? That's a special kind of combat, one they don't cover in basic training. The kind that leaves wounds you can't see and scars you can't explain. I reached for my phone, opened the camera, and started documenting. Because sometimes the best defense isn't a swift attack, it's gathering intelligence. And right then, sitting in that rental car across from my own house, I knew this was going to be the most important reconnaissance mission of my life. I spent that first night in my car, parked behind the 24-hour laundromat where Tessa and I used to wash our clothes before we could afford our own washer. The irony wasn't lost on me. My phone's screen lit up the darkness as I logged into our joint account, the one I'd been faithfully depositing into for 15 years. Balance, $47.32. I blinked hard, thinking maybe exhaustion was playing tricks on my eyes, but the number didn't change. Last I checked, there'd been just over $40,000 in there. Money we'd saved together, built up month by month, deployment by deployment. Gone. My hands started shaking, not from anger, but from something colder, something that felt like ice spreading through my chest. I pulled up the transaction history, and there it was. A series of withdrawals over the past month, each one just under the daily limit. Smart. Calculated. This wasn't impulse. This was strategy. You know what's worse than being betrayed? Realizing it's been coming for a long time, and you were too trusting to see it. I drove to the nearest motel, the kind where the neon sign flickers and the parking lot's more potholes than pavement. The night clerk barely looked up from his phone as he handed me a key that felt too heavy in my palm. Room 115. The numbers were crooked on the door, just like everything else in my life had become. Sleep wasn't happening. Instead, I opened my laptop and started digging. Property records, court filings, anything public. That's when I found it. A legal notice buried in the county records. Tessa had filed for alimony 3 weeks ago, claiming abandonment. Abandonment. The word sat there on my screen like a slap in the face. She'd told the court I'd cut off contact, stopped supporting her, left her to fend for herself. The house deed was next. Somehow, and I had a pretty good idea how, she'd managed to get it transferred solely into her name. The home I'd bought with my sign-on bonus and years of careful saving wasn't mine anymore. At least, not on paper. Morning came too fast, and not fast enough. I drove back to my street. Felt strange calling it that now, and there it was, a for sale sign stabbed into my front lawn like a victory flag. The sight of it made my coffee turn sour in my stomach. I pulled out my phone and called the number on the sign. Put on my best interested buyer voice, the one I used when dealing with brass who needed their vehicles fixed yesterday. "Yes, I'm calling about the property on Oak Street," I said, watching a cardinal land on the sign. "Could you tell me about the showing schedule?" The agent was eager, chatty, too chatty. "Oh, you're in luck. We've already got a serious buyer lined up. Mrs. Harrison, Her husband's a colonel at the base. Is very interested. She's viewing the property tomorrow morning. The phone nearly slipped from my hand. Colonel Harrison's wife. My commanding officer's wife was going to buy my house. The house I was supposed to be deployed from. The house I technically didn't own anymore. Sir? Are you still there? Yeah, I managed. Just thinking about my schedule. Tomorrow morning, you said? After hanging up, I sat there watching that cardinal hop around the sign. It reminded me of the ones Tessa used to point out when we first moved in. They mate for life, she told me then, all bright-eyed and full of dreams about our future. Just like us. The bird flew away, and I found myself gripping the steering wheel again, but not in anger this time. This was different. This was the same grip I used on my wrench when facing a particularly stubborn bolt, the kind that needs patience, precision, and the right amount of pressure to come loose. Because now I knew something Tessa didn't. She wasn't just betraying me. She was about to drag my commanding officer's family into her web of lies. And if there's one thing the Army taught me, it's that sometimes the best way to win isn't to fight. It's to let the enemy's own actions become their undoing. I sat in my truck, watching that for sale sign like it might sprout legs and walk away. Colonel Harrison's wife. The coincidence was too perfect, too cruel. I could already picture Tessa showing her around my house, spinning stories about her absent husband, while my CO's wife nodded sympathetically. The thought made my jaw clench so tight I could hear my teeth grinding. You ever have one of those moments where everything seems broken, but then you remember that one person who always knows what to do? That's when Dennis came to mind. Dennis Claiborne and I went way back, all the way to my first deployment when some local contractor tried to scam me out of my signing bonus. Dennis was the JAG attorney who not only shut that down, but made sure the guy never worked another military contract again. These days, he ran a veterans legal aid clinic in Wichita, helping guys like me navigate the system that sometimes forgot about us. I pulled out my phone and stared at it for a good minute. It was nearly midnight, but Dennis wasn't exactly known for normal business hours. The phone rang twice. Claiborne, he answered, sounding wide awake. Dennis, it's Jack Meriden. There was a pause, then a low chuckle. Staff Sergeant Meriden. Been a while. You're supposed to be in... Yeah, about that. I gave him the quick version, the text, the boyfriend, the empty account, the house transfer, and finally, Colonel Harrison's wife. The silence on the other end stretched so long I thought we'd lost connection. Then I heard him take a slow breath. She screwed with the wrong vet, he muttered, and something in his tone made me sit up straighter. Meet me tomorrow. Denny's on 14th. 0700. The diner was almost empty when I walked in the next morning. Dennis sat in a corner booth, looking exactly like I remembered. Silver crew cut, blazer over a flannel shirt, and that slight limp from an old jump injury. A stack of legal papers sat next to his coffee cup. You look like hell, he said, as I slid into the booth. Feel worse. The waitress came by. Dennis ordered another coffee. I just shook my head. First thing, Dennis said, pulling out a yellow legal pad. We document everything. Bank records, text messages, security camera footage if we can get it. Property transfers leave paper trails. Powers of attorney need witnesses. Notaries keep logs. He scribbled as he talked, his handwriting as precise as ever. She's made mistakes. They always do. I leaned back, feeling the vinyl booth crackle under my weight. What about the house showing today? Dennis's pen stopped moving. He looked up, those sharp eyes studying me. You're not thinking of stopping it. No, but... Good. He tapped his pen on the pad. Because right now, your best weapon is that she doesn't know you're here. The minute you show yourself, she'll start covering tracks. Let her keep digging her hole deeper. The smell of coffee and bacon wrapped around us like a familiar blanket. It reminded me of late-night strategy sessions during my legal troubles years ago. Dennis always 3 steps ahead, of whatever problem I'd brought him. "I've got a camera guy," he continued, "ex-MP who does surveillance work now. We'll need photos, videos, everything. And Jack?" He waited until I met his eyes. "No contact with anyone. Not neighbors, not friends, not even your unit. Far as the world's concerned, you're still deployed. Understood?" I nodded, feeling the first glimmer of something like hope since that text message. Dennis slid a business card across the table. "My personal cell. Any hour." We wrapped up the meeting, and I headed for the door, my steps lighter than they'd been in days. The morning sun hit my face as I stepped outside, and for a moment, everything felt almost normal. Then I reached for my truck keys and froze. The motel parking lot was empty. Not just empty. My spot was empty. The spot where I'd left my paid-off Ford F-150, the one with the custom rack I'd installed myself, was nothing but oil stains on concrete. My hand went to my pocket, fingers closing around my phone. But before I could dial Dennis, a familiar engine sound caught my attention from the street. My truck, rolled past the motel entrance, and through the windshield, I caught a glimpse of the driver, Tessa's new boyfriend, wearing my army cap like it was his to take. I left Dennis at the diner with a clearer head, but a heavier heart. Something told me to drive past the house one more time. Call it military instinct, or just plain stubbornness. As I rounded the corner onto my street, I nearly drove straight into a lamppost. There in my driveway was my truck. My pride and joy, the dark blue F-150 I'd spent 3 deployments paying off, was being scrubbed down by some guy in basketball shorts and flip-flops. The same guy who'd been wearing my robe, drinking from my mug. The same guy who was now treating my vehicle like his personal property. You know that feeling when you're so angry you get calm? That's where I was. I pulled over 2 houses down, killed the rental car's engine, and just watched. The guy, I'd later learn his name was Brent, was whistling while he worked, like he didn't have a care in the world, like he hadn't helped steal another man's life. I pulled out my phone and started recording. The timestamp would matter later. Dennis had taught me that much. Through the lens, I watched Brent finish washing my truck, hop in, and drive off like he owned it. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel, but I kept my cool. Don't react. Record. "We need better equipment," Dennis said when I showed him the shaky phone footage. He made a call to someone he knew from his JAG days, and by that afternoon, we had a proper surveillance setup. Nothing fancy, just a couple of discrete cameras we could mount on nearby properties and a decent zoom lens for my phone. Over the next 3 days, we documented everything. Brent driving my truck to the grocery store. Brent using my truck to help someone move furniture. But the kicker came when we caught him pulling into the parking lot of Wilson Manufacturing, dressed in a suit and carrying a resume. He was using my truck for job interviews. "This is good," Dennis said, reviewing the footage in his office. The place reminded me of an old army barracks. All function, no frills. But we need more. The truck's just the appetizer. I nodded, remembering how Tessa had somehow transferred everything into her name. The power of attorney? Exactly. Dennis pulled out a thick folder. I had my paralegal pull every document filed in the last 6 months. Property transfers, bank accounts, vehicle registrations. He stopped suddenly, frowning at one particular page. "What is it?" "This notary stamp." He held the paper closer to his desk lamp. "The authentication number's wrong." I leaned forward. "Wrong how?" "Each notary has a unique identifier. This one." He pulled out his phone, checked something. "This number belongs to a notary in Topeka who retired 3 years ago." The implications hit me like a freight train. "She forged it?" Dennis shook his head slowly, still studying the document. "No, this is professional work. Someone with access to proper equipment." He looked up at me. "Jack, remind me what Tessa's sister does for a living?" My stomach dropped. Sarah, Tessa's older sister, had been a notary for years. She'd even notarized our mortgage papers when we first bought the house. You think Sarah helped her? I think, Dennis said, carefully placing the document in a separate folder. We just found our smoking gun. He explained how notary fraud was a serious offense, one that could not only invalidate every document Sarah had stamped, but could cost her her license and possibly lead to criminal charges. And if she helped Tessa commit fraud, I sat back, letting it sink in. This wasn't just about my truck anymore. This wasn't even just about the house. This was about systematic fraud. About two sisters who thought they could game the system and erase me from my own life. So, what's our next move? I asked. Dennis was already reaching for his phone. Now, we go to the DA's office. But first, he looked at me with that sharp, tactical expression I remembered from his JAG days. We need to get every security camera recording from around your house. If Sarah visited Tessa during this time, we can establish conspiracy. I thought about all those times I'd seen Sarah's car in our driveway while I was watching from across the street. All those manila envelopes she'd carried in and out. At the time, I'd been too focused on Tessa and Brent to pay attention. Now those visits took on a whole new meaning. I can get those recordings, I said, already planning which neighbors to talk to. How long do we need? Give me everything from the past month, Dennis replied, his pen moving across his legal pad. Every visit, every envelope, every conversation in the front yard. We're going to build this case brick by brick. Back in Dennis's office, the afternoon sun cast long shadows across his desk as we pored over the documents. The familiar smell of old coffee and leather chairs brought back memories of late-night mission briefing. Only this time, we were hunting paper trails instead of targets. Look at this, Dennis said, sliding the deed transfer across his desk. His finger tapped the bottom right corner, where an official-looking stamp sat. Notice anything? I leaned in, studying the document. The notary's name jumped out at me like a neon sign. Marla Barnes. My throat went dry. That's Tessa's sister. Bingo! Dennis's face hardened into that expression I'd seen 1,000 times when he was building a case. And here's where it gets interesting. He pulled out another document, an older one from our original mortgage. Compare the stamps. I placed them side by side. Even to my untrained eye, something was off. The newer stamp looked crisper somehow. Too perfect. They're different? Oh, they're different, all right. Dennis pulled out a magnifying glass. Old school, like something from a detective movie. See these little imperfections in the old one? Natural wear and tear. But this new one? He pointed to the deed transfer. It's pristine, like it just came out of the box. Could she have gotten a new stamp? That's what I thought at first. Dennis reached for his phone. So I called the county clerk's office. Marla renewed her notary commission last year. Same stamp, same number. She didn't order a new one. The implications started sinking in. She made a fake stamp? Either that, or someone did it for her. Dennis leaned back in his chair, and I could practically see the gears turning in his head. Creating a fraudulent notary stamp is a Class C felony. Add that to knowingly notarizing false documents. How much time are we talking about? Up to 5 years, per occurrence. He gave me a meaningful look. And I'm betting this isn't the only document they've done this way. I remembered all those times I'd seen Marla's car in our driveway during my surveillance. Those manila envelopes she always carried. How many other documents had they forged? How deep did this go? You ever wonder, I said, how people convince themselves this kind of thing is okay? Dennis snorted. In my experience, they start small. A little white lie here, a small favor there. Before they know it, they're in too deep to back out. He gathered the documents into a neat pile. But that's not our problem. Our job is to make sure they face consequences. He picked up his phone again, this time dialing a number from memory. Karen? Dennis Claiborne. Listen, I need to flag a deed transfer that came through last month. He rattled off the details while I sat there, trying to process everything. The whole thing felt surreal. My wife and her sister, playing document forgery like it was some kind of twisted family business. Part of me wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it all, but there was nothing funny about fraud. Dennis hung up the phone. Okay, that'll slow things down at the county level. Now for the big guns. He started typing on his computer. I'm sending everything we've got to the DA's office. The fake stamp, the forged signatures, the family connection. It's all going in. I nodded, feeling strangely hollow. What happens next? We wait, but not for long. Dennis's printer hummed to life. The DA's office takes notary fraud seriously. Once they see this pattern, his phone rang, cutting him off. He answered, listened for a moment, then his eyebrows shot up. Already? No, that's perfect. Yes, we'll cooperate fully. He hung up, and for the first time since this whole mess started, I saw him smile. That was the DA's office. They're opening a formal investigation. Seems they've had their eye on some suspicious notarizations in the area already. I should have felt triumphant. This was what we wanted, after all. But all I could think about was my name, still missing from that deed. What about the house? Dennis's smile faded slightly. One battle at a time, Jack. Right now, we've got them on the ropes with this fraud investigation. The house, that's next. I nodded, standing up. The sun had set while we were working, and the office was dark except for Dennis's desk lamp. Time to head back to my motel room, my temporary home, while my real one sat in legal limbo. Jack, Dennis called as I reached the door. We're going to fix this. All of it. I believed him. But as I drove through the darkening streets, past houses with warm lights and families inside, I couldn't help wondering how many more documents would surface, how many more lies we'd have to unravel before I could reclaim my life. 3 days after we discovered the notary fraud, Dennis called me into his office. The familiar smell of coffee and old law books hit me as I walked in, reminded me of those late nights in the JAG office back when I was a young recruit getting my first Article 15. The DA's office just sent this over. Dennis handed me a thick manila envelope. They're not wasting any time. Inside were copies of subpoenas for every bank account, credit card, and loan application Tessa had touched in the last 2 years. The stack of paper felt heavy in my hands, like the weight of all her lies made physical. They're focusing on the alimony claim first, Dennis explained, tapping the top document. See these dates? She filed for abandonment while you were still officially stationed at base. That's not just wrong. It's perjury. I flipped through the pages, seeing dollar amounts that made my jaw clench. She claimed I hadn't sent money home in 6 months. Yeah, well, these bank records show different. Dennis pulled out another sheet. Regular deposits from your military pay, plus that extra combat pay you earned. The DA's office is having a field day with this. A knock at the door interrupted us. Dennis's assistant poked her head in. The video's ready. We moved to the conference room where a laptop was set up. The footage wasn't Hollywood quality, but it was clear enough. Tessa's boyfriend, walking up to my mailbox day after day, pulling out letters and packages. Sometimes he'd open them right there on the porch. Other times, he'd stuff them in his jacket. Mail theft, Dennis said, pausing the playback. Federal offense. And look at this. He switched to another clip. The boyfriend was using my truck again, this time pulling into what looked like an office parking lot. That's where he works. Or worked, I should say. I raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? Remember that anonymous tip line their HR department has? Dennis's smile had an edge to it. Amazing what people do when they think no one's watching. That evening, I drove past the house again. Couldn't help myself. It had become a habit, like checking your weapon before patrol. The porch light was on, and there was shouting coming from inside. I pulled over just as the front door burst open. The boyfriend stormed out, clutching a garbage bag. Even from across the street, I could see his face was red with anger. He stomped over to the trash cans and slammed the bag inside, muttering loud enough for his voice to carry. "Stupid male. Getting me fired. This is all your fault." Tessa appeared in the doorway, arms crossed. "My fault? You're the one who got caught. Because you said it was fine. Oh, he's deployed. He'll never know." Well, guess what? Someone knew. Their argument faded as I eased my rental car past, but I'd heard enough. Back at the motel, I called Dennis. "You catch the show tonight?" he asked before I could say anything. "How'd you know I was there?" "Because I know you, Jack, and because I had someone watching too. Got it all on video, including him disposing of stolen mail. That's evidence tampering on top of everything else." I sat on the edge of the motel bed, suddenly tired. "What's next?" "Tomorrow morning, you give your deposition. Everything by the book. No emotions, just facts. The DA wants to know exactly when you returned, what you observed, and how you discovered the fraud. And then? Then we let the system work." Dennis's voice softened slightly. "Look, I know it's hard watching from the sidelines, but sometimes the best revenge is just letting people face the consequences of their own actions." He was right. Every instinct I'd developed in the service told me to confront, to act, to fix things head-on. But this was different. This was about patience and precision, letting each piece fall exactly where it needed to. "Get some rest," Dennis said. "Tomorrow's going to be a long day." I hung up and lay back on the bed, staring at the water-stained ceiling. Through the thin walls I could hear a TV playing in the next room, some sitcom with a laugh track. The sound felt wrong, like hearing jokes at a funeral. But maybe that's what this was, the death of my old life, playing out one revelation at a time. The next morning hit like a grenade going off. I was sipping burnt motel coffee when Dennis called. "Turn on your laptop. Now." I flipped it open to find our local community Facebook page lighting up. Someone had posted a video from outside Brent's workplace, one of those glass and steel buildings where people wear ties and pretend they're in New York instead of Kansas. Security was escorting him out, box of personal items in his arms. But that wasn't the showstopper. Tessa was there, right in the parking lot, screaming her head off. "This isn't fair! He didn't do anything wrong!" Her voice cracked like cheap plastic. "You can't fire someone over a few pieces of mail." I winced. Back when we first met, I loved how passionate she could get, how she'd fight for what she believed in. Funny how time changes your view of things, like watching an old movie and suddenly seeing all the plot holes. "Keep watching," Dennis said in my ear. The video panned to show other employees filming with their phones. Brent tried grabbing Tessa's arm, probably to shut her up, but she jerked away. "Don't touch me! This is your fault. You said nobody would notice." "Got to love karma," Dennis chuckled. "But we're not done. Meet me at the office in an hour." The law office felt different that morning, more serious, like a command center before an operation. Dennis had papers spread across his desk, sticky notes everywhere. He looked up when I walked in, his face tight. "We've got complications. Judge Matthews is presiding over the case." My stomach dropped. The one who usually sides with the wife in property disputes. Even with the fraud evidence, she might still split things down the middle, just to be fair. He made air quotes with his fingers. I remembered that old saying about fair fights being for suckers. "What's our play?" "We need something bulletproof. The fraud charges are solid, but—" His phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then smiled. "Well, well. Speaking of bulletproof." "What?" "Marla just caved. Her lawyer's sending over a signed affidavit right now." He turned his monitor so I could see the email. "Seems your sister-in-law doesn't fancy the idea of losing her notary license. Or worse." I leaned forward to read. Marla's statement was clear. Tessa had pressured her into notarizing the deed transfer without proper documentation. She admitted to backdating the forms, even detailed specific conversations where Tessa planned the whole thing. "It's a start," Dennis said. "But we're not home free. The judge could still rule that you abandoned the property, even temporarily. And there's the matter of that power of attorney Tessa filed. But I never signed. You and I know that. But proving forgery takes time. Labs, experts, testimony. He shuffled some papers. Right now, that document still exists. It still has legal weight. I sat back, feeling that familiar combat tension, knowing the enemy's location but not having a clear shot. So, what do? We keep building. This affidavit gives us leverage, but we need more. Bank records showing your continued support, surveillance footage of them using your property, witness statements from neighbors. He paused. And you need to be ready to testify. That hit me hard. Part of me had hoped to stay in the shadows, to let the legal system do its work without having to face her. But Dennis was right. This was my fight, too. When? Next week. We'll prep you thoroughly, but it won't be easy. Tessa's lawyer will try to paint you as the absent husband, too focused on your career to care about your marriage. I thought about all those video calls from overseas, all those care packages I'd sent, the way I'd always made sure our bills were paid first, before spending a dime on myself. Let them try. Dennis nodded, then his phone buzzed again. His eyebrows shot up as he read the message. What now? Marla's not just talking about the notary fraud anymore. She's offering details about other documents, bills of sale, insurance forms. He looked up at me. Seems your wife's been busy playing forgery artist for a while now. I should have felt satisfied, maybe even vindicated. Instead, I just felt tired. Not the physical tired of a long patrol, but something deeper. The kind of tired that comes from watching something you built get torn down piece by piece. Dennis must have seen it in my face. We're getting there, Jack. But this isn't over yet. I know. I stood up, straightening my shoulders like I was back in formation. What's our next move? I stood across the street from our house, my house, watching the morning sun climb over the roof. One more circle around the property. One last check before everything changed. You ever notice how places look different when you're about to lose them? Or maybe win them back? The grass needed cutting. Weeds were pushing up through the flower beds where Tessa used to plant her seasonal arrangement. Remember those first few years? She'd spend whole weekends on her knees in the dirt, humming to herself while positioning each bulb just right. Now those beds were choked with dandelions, like everything else she'd stopped caring about. My phone buzzed. Dennis's message was short. Judge reviewed full evidence package. Be ready. I touched the worn key in my pocket, the one I'd never turned in, never used. Funny how something so small could feel so heavy. The windows stared back at me, dark and accusatory, like they'd forgotten who built the deck that wrapped around them, who'd spent countless weekends sealing and painting their frames. 2 hours later, I sat in the courtroom, my service uniform pressed and perfect. Dennis had insisted, said it would remind everyone what was really at stake. Tessa swept in wearing something expensive-looking, all confidence and practiced poise. Her lawyer whispered something that made her smile. That smile used to mean something different, back when we shared Sunday morning pancakes and lazy afternoon naps. The bailiff called us to order. Judge Matthews entered, her face unreadable as granite. The room felt like a pressure cooker, all that tension waiting to blow. Dennis sat beside me, steady as a rifle stock. Having reviewed the evidence, Judge Matthews began, I find several disturbing elements in this case. Tessa's smile flickered, but held. Her lawyer shifted papers around, probably searching for whatever argument they'd rehearsed. First, the judge continued, multiple instances of forged signatures on legal documents, including power of attorney forms and property transfers. She looked directly at Tessa. The forensics report is quite conclusive. That smile finally cracked. I watched Tessa's fingers start to twist in her lap, an old tell from when she knew she was caught in a lie. Second, False financial declarations regarding support and abandonment. Judge Matthews lifted a sheet of paper. Bank records show consistent deposits and bill payments throughout the alleged abandonment period. Dennis had done his homework there, tracking every dime I'd sent home during deployment, every utility bill paid on time, every mortgage payment cleared. Third, and most concerning, is the misuse of power of attorney, coupled with fraudulent notarization. The judge's voice hardened. This court takes a particularly dim view of such systematic deception. Tessa's lawyer tried to interrupt, but Judge Matthews shut him down with a look that could have frozen hell. The property transfer is hereby nullified. All rights and ownership revert to Staff Sergeant Meriden, effective immediately. The gavel cracked like a gunshot. Additionally, I am referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for review of potential criminal charges. Just like that. Done. The room started to empty, but I stayed seated, letting it sink in. Through the windows, I could hear Tessa crying on the courthouse steps. Not the quiet tears she'd used to get her way so many times before, but ugly, angry sobs that echoed off the stone. But I wasn't looking at her. My eyes were fixed beyond, toward home, past the manicured courthouse lawn to where my house waited, my porch, my front door. The same door I'd carried her through as newlyweds, the one I'd reinforced during tornado season, the one I'd never used to sneak in like a thief in my own life. Dennis squeezed my shoulder. "Ready to go home, Jack?" I nodded, standing slowly. Through the window, I could see my porch clearly now, worn boards I'd helped my neighbor sand and stain one hot summer weekend, empty chairs where we used to watch thunderstorms roll in. Everything looked exactly the same and completely different. The key slid home like it belonged there, like it had just been waiting all this time. Behind me, Dennis's footsteps crunched down the walk, fading into the quiet afternoon. I stood there for a minute, hand still on the doorknob, letting myself feel the weight of it all. You ever notice how houses have their own heartbeat? The way they creak and settle? How the air moves different when you're alone? Walking in, I got hit with that sickly sweet vanilla smell from Tessa's discount candles. She'd always burned 3 or 4 at once, trying to cover up the honest smells of home. Fresh-cut grass tracked in on my boots, coffee grounds, old wood. The living room looked like a museum of someone else's life. His magazines on my coffee table, her new throw pillows on our old couch, their empty wine glasses by the sink. I opened every window in the place, letting the Kansas wind blow through like a cleansing breath. "Time to get to work," I muttered, heading for the garage where my tools waited. Remember those old war movies where soldiers reclaim their territory inch by inch? That's exactly what it felt like. First order of business. New locks. The hardware store guy, Pete, didn't ask questions when I bought them, just nodded like he understood. Small towns, right? Everyone knows, but nobody says. I spent that first afternoon removing every trace of the old locks, making sure the new ones fit snug and true. The solid click of fresh tumblers felt like victory. The front door was next. That faded red had been Tessa's choice, said it made the house more welcoming. I stripped it down to bare wood, each scrape of the sandpaper erasing another layer of the past. Primer went on clean and smooth, followed by a deep navy blue that reminded me of summer storms rolling in across the plains. "Looking sharp, Jack," Mrs. Henderson called from next door. She'd been watering her roses, pretending not to watch. I waved back, appreciating how she didn't try to make small talk. Some things are better left in the silence. The boxes came last. All her stuff I found tucked in closets, crammed under beds, hidden in the attic, like she'd tried to scatter pieces of herself throughout the house's bones. I packed it all, careful but quick, like handling old ammunition that might still have some bite. When the last box hit the curb, something tight in my chest finally loosened. You know what's funny? How fast word spreads in a neighborhood. By Wednesday, everyone knew I was home for good. The Wilsons brought over a casserole. Old Man Tucker offered to help repaint the trim. Even the mail carrier gave me a quiet, "Welcome back, Sergeant," when he passed. Friday evening rolled around, and for the first time in forever, I felt like celebrating. Drove down to Miller's Market, same place I'd been buying meat since high school, and picked out a thick ribeye. The butcher, Carl, wrapped it in brown paper with careful hands. "Good to see you back where you belong, son," he said, sliding the package across the counter. The weight of it felt right, felt earned. Back home, I grabbed a cold beer from the fridge and headed out to the back deck. The grill had needed a good scrubbing, looked like they'd never cleaned it properly, but now it gleamed in the setting sun. I lifted the lid with a satisfying creak, letting the warm charcoal smell rise up around me. The neighbor kids were playing basketball down the street, their shouts and laughter carrying on the evening air. Sprinklers ticked away in nearby yards. Someone was mowing their lawn, that sweet grass smell mixing with the smoke from my grill. All those normal, everyday sounds I'd missed so much overseas. Now they were mine again. The steak sizzled when it hit the grates, and I couldn't help grinning. Not because I'd won, exactly. More because everything had worked out the way it was supposed to. The right way. The honest way. I took a pull from my beer and watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and purple. My house, my grill, my peace of mind. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's just standing your ground and letting justice do its work. The ribeye hit the grates with that perfect sizzle. You know the sound. The one that promises everything's going to be just right. I'd dreamed about this moment during those long nights on base, staring at sand and stars, thinking about home. Funny how life has a way of changing your dreams, isn't it? The meat started forming those beautiful char lines while the sunset painted everything in soft gold. From where I stood, I could see clear across my backyard to the maple tree I'd planted our first year here. It had grown strong and tall, outlasting the marriage it was meant to commemorate. Some things endure on their own merit, I guess. A breeze carried the aroma of cooking steak through the neighborhood. Down the street, porch lights were starting to flicker on like fireflies. Mrs. Wilson was walking her dog. She gave me a little wave. Her husband had helped me hang the new American flag earlier that day, making sure we got the angle just right. It caught the wind now, snapping smartly against the fresh navy blue of the front door. The whole town knew the story by now, of course. How could they not? The courthouse drama had played out like a soap opera in front of everyone. Tessa's boyfriend, what was his name again? Brent? Had been fired so publicly it made the local Facebook groups explode. Last I heard, he'd skulked back to whatever city he'd come from, tail between his legs. And Tessa? Well, her carefully crafted image as the wronged wife had shattered like cheap glass when the judge read out those fraud charges. I flipped the steak, watching the juices sizzle and pop. The old grill thermometer needle held steady at the perfect temperature, just like I'd maintained through this whole mess. Steady, controlled, patient. The screen door creaked behind me, and for a split second my shoulders tensed. Old habits die hard, I suppose, but it was just the evening wind, pushing through the house like nature's own cleaning service. I'd gotten used to those empty rooms again, filled them with my own quiet purpose. No more wine glasses in the sink, no more strangers' clothes in my closet, no more borrowed life. Taking a sip of my beer, I studied the fresh paint on the porch railings. The whole place looked different now. Better, stronger somehow, like it had shed an old skin and emerged more itself than ever. The neighbors had watched the transformation day by day. New locks, new paint, new purpose. Even the garden looked sharper after I'd pulled all the weeds and laid down fresh mulch. The smell of perfectly cooked meat filled the air as I pressed the tongs against the steak. The resistance told me exactly what I needed to know. Medium rare, just how I liked it. I'd learned patience in the army, learned to wait for the right moment. That patience had served me well these past few weeks, letting karma do its work while I stayed above the fray. You want to know something funny? Throughout this whole ordeal, I never once raised my voice, never threw a punch, never even sent an angry text. Didn't have to. The truth has a way of fighting its own battles if you just step back and let it work. The flag rippled again in the breeze as I plated my steak, stars and stripes catching the last rays of sunset, proud and proper above my reclaimed home. Below it, the fresh paint gleamed like armor. Inside, my house waited, clean and honest, every room restored to its proper purpose. Standing there on my porch, and yes, it was mine again, legally and morally, I felt something settle in my chest. Not victory, exactly. Something calmer, more permanent. The kind of peace you can only get from knowing you did things the right way. You don't rebuild honor, I said quietly to the evening air. You guard it. The words hung there in the gathering dusk, simple and true as a promise kept. Behind me, the screen door creaked one more time in the wind, but I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. I knew exactly where I stood. I believe stories like this find us for a reason. If this one touched you, please subscribe. I share a new one every day, and tomorrow's might be the one your heart's been waiting for.